Roya Soleimani, and I'm a communications manager at Google, and I also advise early-stage startups on their communication and branding. And I was hoping to share 10 tips with you today that I've picked up along the way about communications and storytelling. Now, each of us have a story to tell, but public speaking and talking in front of a group can often be a little gut-wrenching. So I put together these 10 tips. This is by no means a complete list, but at least some of the things I know will help you take your messaging from here to here and hopefully deliver something memorable that people won't forget. Now, number one, what is the problem you're trying to address? Whether it's a platform, a product, a new service, you as a person who's out there pitching yourself, what problem are you trying to address and how are you positioned to solve it? Now, number two, identify your story. What sparked your personal interest in this? Oftentimes, founders and entrepreneurs are so steeped into the work that they're doing, they forget that they're a player in that work and that there's a reason that they went from, say, another industry or another job and took on this new startup life or working for a company. So what is that story? What was your shift or your inflection point? And what makes you and your team uniquely positioned to solve that first problem you were addressing? Number three, know your message. Now, this is critical. This goes back to your values as a company or as a person or as a brand. And if you're telling that story to the world, you have to sit down and put those on paper. Think about three key messages. What are your values? What are the things that you're trying to solve? And what do you want people to remember about your brand? Now that goes nicely into number four, which is know your audience. Now the audience piece is critical because the message that you tell that we just talked about really is contingent upon the audience. If it's a technical audience, you want to talk about things like APIs and how you're different in the technical space. If it's a less technical but a more consumer audience, you want to make sure your messaging is focused on that depending on your audience. And let's say it's an investor, you want to make sure that your pitch is talking about the bottom line, about money, about how it's going to grow in the future. So that message is really contingent upon the audience. Now, number five, avoid being too technical. Now, the litmus test that I like to have when I'm reading copy or talking with a founder is, would my parents or your parents understand this? Not everyone is an engineer. And so the idea when you're so close to something and you think that the technical aspects are what sets us apart, make sure your audience is a technical one. Generally, it won't be. And so make sure you're talking in a way that everyone can understand. Now, number six, what is your call to action? That might be downloading your app. It might be getting involved on a newsletter. It very well might just be that someone walks away knowing something about you that's different, which is why that messaging is so important. And hopefully they walk away with something that's positive and a good feeling. So when they read about you or see you again, there's that point of remembering something that you shared. Number seven, be aware of nonverbal cues. The way you talk, maybe you're smiling, your body language, those things all matter in how people feel about how they relate to you, or the first thoughts they might have when they see you. So make sure that you're speaking with confidence. One little tip here for nonverbal cues that matters is just making sure that you're making eye contact with someone or that you've got a really strong handshake. And if you're on the phone, another tip is try maybe walking while you're talking so you project more and don't forget to smile even on the phone. Now, the next one, number eight, repetition never spoiled the prayer. Re-emphasizing your messaging and your value proposition is a wonderful thing to do, woven throughout your conversation. This is fantastic because when someone walks away after hearing you for 5 minutes or 20 minutes, they stopped and said, what did I learn from this? You want to make sure that you've emphasized those key messages enough that they could be your ambassador. They could speak on your behalf because they understand what you stand for. Now, number nine, know when to pivot and how to pivot. This is particularly important if you're getting asked questions, whether it's from an investor or a reporter or someone in the audience. Now, when you're really close to your work, you're really maybe emotional about it. And if someone asks you a difficult question, do not get defensive in responding. Say something like, that's a really good question, but the way I think about it is this. Or you bring up a good point, but the way we look at it is actually X, Y, or Z. That's much better than repeating their negativity back at them and makes you seem a lot more calm-headed. Even if you're upset on the inside, you want to make sure to keep it cool on the outside. And number 10, practice, practice, practice. In front of a camera, in front of the mirror, in front of your friends and family, and preferably in front of people who don't know what you're doing very closely, so that way they can give you objective advice from an outside perspective. If you're just pitching to your own team, they already know your value proposition. And maybe some of the things that you leave out in your conversation, they already know about. So if you share it with someone who is not as familiar, they'll help you hone the message and deliver it in a way that everyone can understand. Hopefully these tips have been helpful. Again, this is not at all an exhaustive list, but the top 10 things I've learned working in this business for a while. Best of luck, and don't forget, know your message and know your audience.